She inherited a haunted manor.
Explain this to me right now.
Inside lived a vampire
I
king
saw the
waiting
message.
300 years
How
for
could
her
you do
blood.
this?
Alara's hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the old letter. The parchment was yellowed with age, the ink faded, but the words were clear enough to understand. She had inherited something she had never expected, a manor, ancient and grand, that belonged to a family she had barely known existed. Her father had always been secretive about distant relatives, and her mother had passed away years ago. This news, delivered by a lawyer's formal voice, had come as a shock. The manor stood at the edge of the kingdom, surrounded by mountains and thick forests. It was said to be haunted, and though she didn't believe much in ghost stories, she could not deny the sense of unease that settled in her stomach. Still, there was curiosity, too. She wanted to see the place that had been in her family for centuries, to understand why it had been left to her. As the carriage moved along the winding road to the manor, a thick mist curled around the trees, swallowing the landscape in a gray haze. Alara pressed her hands together, feeling the chill through her gloves. The manor came into view gradually, like a vision from a dream. Its tall towers and spiked roofs rose against the darkening sky. Stone walls were covered with ivy, and the windows glowed faintly in the fading sunlight, as if the house itself were breathing. When she finally arrived, the manor's massive wooden doors creaked as she pushed them open. The entrance hall was enormous, with high ceilings that seemed to stretch forever. Dust covered the floors and cobwebs clung to the corners, yet there was a strange beauty in the decay. Elaborate chandeliers hung overhead, their crystals dull but still sparkling faintly when the sunlight struck them. Portraits lined the walls, serious faces of men and women who seemed to watch her with eyes full of secrets. Alara stepped forward cautiously, her boots echoing against the stone. The air smelled faintly of old wood and something she couldn't name, something metallic like iron mixed with the scent of roses. She shivered, unsure whether it was the cold or the feeling that the house was alive. She explored the manor slowly, room by room. In the drawing room, a grand fireplace dominated the wall. Though no fire burned, the hearth felt warm in a strange way, as if it remembered warmth from long ago. Heavy velvet curtains framed tall windows, and the furniture, though covered in dust, was elegant and carefully preserved. Alara ran her fingers along the arm of a chair, marveling at the intricate carvings. Someone had cared for this place once. She wondered who had lived here and why it had been left empty for so long. Night came quickly in the mountains. Alara lit candles and moved carefully through the halls. Shadows danced along the walls, and every creak of the floor made her heart skip a beat. She reached the library, a room filled with towering shelves of books. The smell of old paper was comforting, and she found herself drawn to the quiet. As she ran her fingers along the spines, a loose book fell from a shelf, landing at her feet. The cover was black, with golden letters she could barely read. She opened it carefully, and as she did, a chill ran down her spine. The pages were filled with handwriting, elegant and old, describing events from centuries past. The writing spoke of a king, of a curse, and of a guardian who waited. Alara felt her breath catch. The words seemed familiar, as if they were meant for her eyes. She read about a dark chamber in the deepest tower of the manor, a room sealed for 300 years. The last line chilled her more than the cold wind that rattled the windows. When she comes, the one who waits shall awaken. Alara tried to shake off the feeling of unease. It was just a story, she told herself, but sleep did not come easily that night. She tossed and turned, the candlelight casting long shadows across her room. In the darkness, she dreamed of a man with eyes like molten gold. He stood in the tower, tall and silent, and spoke in a voice that was both commanding and sorrowful. 3 centuries, and now you are here, he said. She woke with a start, her heart pounding. The room was empty, but the echo of his words lingered in her mind. Shaking, she rose and moved to the window. The mist lay thick over the grounds, and the moonlight glinted on the ivy-covered walls. Something about the manor felt alive, watching, waiting. The next day, Alara explored more of the house. She found the kitchen, cold and empty, but still holding the faint smell of herbs and spices long since gone. The dining room was grand, with a long table carved from dark wood. At the far end, a portrait of a man in royal attire stared down at her. His eyes seemed too alive, and she felt a strange pull toward him. Hours passed, and Alara climbed the stairs to the upper floors. She found rooms filled with furniture wrapped in sheets, paintings turned face down, and doors that refused to open. At the very end of the hallway, she discovered a heavy door unlike the others. It was made of dark wood, reinforced with iron and sealed with a strange lock. Something in her chest tightened. This must be the chamber from the book, she thought. The one that had been sealed for 3 centuries. Her fingers hovered over the lock. The air around her seemed to change, colder now, heavier. She almost turned away, telling herself it was dangerous, but curiosity won. She pressed her ear to the door and felt a vibration, as if something on the other side were moving. A whisper brushed her mind, soft and urgent, though no sound reached her ears. Alara took a deep breath and pushed. The door creaked slowly, the sound echoing through the empty hall. The hinges protested, and for a moment she thought the door might not open. Then, with a final groan, it swung inward. The room was dark, lit only by the pale light that filtered through narrow windows. Dust hung in the air, and the furniture was covered in white sheets. But something in the shadows moved, a presence that made her blood run cold and her heart beat faster. From the far corner, a figure stepped forward. Tall, regal, and terrifyingly beautiful. His hair was dark, his eyes glowing like molten gold, and his skin pale as moonlight. He looked at her with a mix of curiosity and hunger, and Alara felt as though he could see into her very soul. "You have come," he said, his voice low, rich, and commanding. "After 300 years, you are finally here." Alara stumbled back, her hands clutching the doorframe. Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I am Kale," he replied, taking a step closer. "I have waited for your blood, for the moment when the last of your line would enter this house, and now it has come." Fear gripped her, but so did fascination. There was something in his presence that drew her in, something beyond logic or reason. He was a king, but not of this world, powerful, ancient, and dangerous. I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "Why me?" Kale's eyes softened slightly, a flicker of sorrow hidden beneath his intensity. "Because your ancestors wronged me. Because the curse of this house has waited for you. Because fate has a way of tying blood to blood, century after century." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. She wanted to run, to escape the room and the pull she felt toward this impossible being, but she could not. Something in her chest told her she was meant to be here, even if she did not yet understand why. The air grew colder, and the shadows in the room seemed to deepen. Kale's gaze held hers, unblinking, unyielding. It was a gaze that promised danger and longing, power and despair. "You must choose," he said quietly, almost tenderly. "You can leave this house, return to your life, and forget me. Or you can stay, and the moment you step fully into this house, the bond begins. You will be mine as I have been yours even before you were born." Alara's mind spun. She felt both fear and a strange pull she could not resist. She wanted to ask questions, to demand answers, but words failed her. She only knew one thing: she could not turn away from him, not entirely. As the night deepened outside the windows, a soft wind stirred the curtains. The manor seemed to sigh, as though it recognized her presence, as though it had been waiting for centuries for her to arrive. Kale stepped closer, his movements slow, deliberate, commanding yet careful, as though aware of her fragile courage. "Do not be afraid," he said. "I will not harm you, not unless you wish it. But know this: once you step further into this house, into this room, into this fate, there is no turning back. The past, the curse, the bloodline, they will claim you as much as they claim me. Alara swallowed hard. She looked around the room, at the shadows that danced along the walls, at the tall windows letting in moonlight that seemed almost alive. She felt the weight of centuries pressing on her, the whispers of ancestors, the longing of a being who had waited far too long. And in that moment she realized she had a choice, but she did not yet know which choice she would make. The wind outside howled through the mountains, rattling the windows. A shadow moved in the corner of the room, faster than her eyes could follow. And Kale's voice, calm yet filled with a strange urgency, spoke again. "Do you understand, Alara? Once you cross this threshold, nothing will ever be the same." She took a step forward, drawn by fear, curiosity, and a force she could not name. And as she did, Kale's eyes flared with an intensity that made her knees weak, and the manor seemed to pulse around them, alive with secrets, magic, and centuries of longing. The chamber was silent for a moment, yet in that silence Alara could feel it, the weight of the past, the pull of destiny, and the presence of something ancient and eternal, waiting just for her. She did not yet know what awaited her, but one thing was certain. Her life and the life of the manor had changed forever. And from the shadows, Kale watched her, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "At last," he whispered, "she has come." Alara stood frozen in the dim chamber, her breath coming in shallow bursts. Kale's golden eyes seemed to burn into her soul, holding centuries of waiting, of loneliness, and of power. She wanted to step back, to flee the manor and escape the pull of this mysterious being, but her feet felt rooted to the cold stone floor. Kale moved closer, but with a careful grace that seemed almost like a dance. His presence was overwhelming, filling the room with a weight that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. "You are here," he said softly, his voice echoing in the high chamber, "and I can feel the blood of your ancestors flowing in you. That is why you were called, why you came." Alara swallowed hard, her mind spinning. "Blood, ancestors, I don't understand. Why me? Why now?" Kale's gaze softened for a fleeting moment, though his power did not diminish. "Because your line bears a debt, a promise left unpaid for centuries. Your arrival awakens what was meant to be fulfilled long ago. And yet," he paused, studying her, "there is something more. Something in you that was always meant to be here, something that calls to me in ways I cannot name." Alara shivered, unsure whether to trust him. The manor seemed to respond to his words. The shadows lengthened, and a faint whispering filled the air, as if the house itself acknowledged what was happening. I don't know if I should stay," she said finally, her voice trembling. "This place, it feels alive." "And you are," her words faltered, unable to express the strange mixture of fear and fascination she felt. Kale took a deliberate step closer but stopped short, leaving space between them. "I am dangerous," he said, almost mournfully. "Centuries of solitude have made me so. I have waited for you, but that does not mean I am safe for you. If you choose to remain, you must understand the cost." Alara's heart pounded. The weight of centuries pressed on her, and yet she could not turn away. She felt a pull she did not understand, a connection older than her own life, deeper than the walls of the manor and more powerful than her fear. I will stay," she said finally, her voice steady despite the fear twisting in her chest. "I don't know why, but I need to understand. I need to know what this place is, what you are." Kale's eyes softened further and he nodded slowly. "Very well, but understand this, once you stay, the bond begins. It is more than blood. It is trust, understanding, and surrender. It will not be easy. It will challenge you in ways you cannot yet imagine." Alara nodded, her pulse quickening. The manor seemed to breathe around them, shadows twisting like living things. She felt the weight of the portraits, the walls, and the centuries of history pressing in, and yet there was a strange comfort in Kale's presence. He turned and gestured toward the chamber beyond. "There is much to show you. This house holds more than walls and furniture. It holds secrets, magic, and a past that cannot rest until it is faced. Follow me if you dare." Her curiosity overcame her fear. She followed him down a narrow hallway, her footsteps echoing against the stone. The corridors twisted and turned like a maze, each corner revealing rooms filled with relics of a bygone age. Suits of armor lined the walls, their metal glinting faintly in the candlelight. Tapestries depicted battles long past, their colors muted but still vivid enough to stir the imagination. As they walked, Kale spoke, his voice low and melodic. "Your ancestors were proud, clever, and ruthless. They wielded power without care, and in doing so they bound me to this house. I have waited, century after century, for the one who could break that chain, and that one is you." Alara felt a chill run down her spine. She had always known her family's history was unusual, but she had never imagined it included curses and immortal beings. "Why me?" she asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because your blood carries the memory of their deeds," Kale replied. "It is the key to undoing the past and freeing not just me, but the spirits trapped in this house. And yet," he added, his eyes darkening, "you are not just a key, you are the choice, and choices have consequences." They reached a grand staircase that spiraled upward, disappearing into shadows. Kale stopped at the base, looking up. "The tower awaits. It is there that the most important truths lie. It is there that your courage will be tested, and where the bond between us will begin to take shape." Alara hesitated, her hand on the railing. The staircase looked impossibly tall, winding into darkness. What will I find up there?" Kale smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and sorrow. "The past," he said simply, "and perhaps the future." The climb was long and silent. The higher they went, the colder it became. The air seemed to shimmer with a strange energy, and Alara felt the pull of something unseen, a force that tugged at her very being. She could hear faint whispers, like the echoes of people long dead, their voices carried on the wind through cracks in the stone. When they reached the top, they emerged into a circular chamber, the ceiling vaulted and covered in intricate frescoes. The walls were lined with mirrors, tall and narrow, reflecting the flickering candlelight. In the center of the room was a pedestal, upon which rested an ancient book bound in black leather. Its cover was etched with strange symbols that seemed to shift when she looked at them. Kale approached the pedestal and placed a hand on the book. "This contains the history of the manor, the curse, and the bloodline. It will reveal what your ancestors did and why I am bound here." He looked at Alara, his golden eyes reflecting the candlelight. "You must read it, but be warned, the truth is not easy to bear." Alara stepped closer, her fingers brushing the cover. She opened the book carefully, and the pages seemed to pulse under her touch. The words spoke of betrayal, power, and longing. They told of Kale's imprisonment within the manor, his centuries of waiting, and the terrible loneliness that had become his companion. As she read, she felt a strange connection to the past, as if the events described were not just history, but a story she had lived in another life. She felt sorrow for the vampire who had suffered so long, and guilt for her ancestors' actions, though they were long gone. Kale watched her silently, his expression unreadable. "Do you understand now?" he asked softly. "The bond I speak of, it is not just about blood. It is about understanding, forgiveness, and the courage to face the past." Alara nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I think I do. But it's so much and so heavy. How could one person fix what centuries have broken?" Kale stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. The touch was warm, yet it carried an electric charge, as if his very being was alive with power. "You are not alone," he said quietly. "I will guide you, protect you, and stand with you, but you must be willing to face the darkness, within this house, within yourself, and within me." The room fell silent. Alara's heart pounded, and she felt the weight of the manor's history pressing down on her. She realized that her choice to stay was not just about curiosity or inheritance. It was about courage, compassion, and a connection she could not yet fully understand. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the chamber, a low, guttural growl that made Alara jump. Shadows shifted along the walls, and the mirrors seemed to ripple, reflecting shapes that were not there. Kale's expression hardened, and his hand moved to rest on the hilt of a sword that hung at his side, though he did not draw it. "They have sensed your presence," he said quietly. "The spirits, the guardians, and others. Not all of them welcome your arrival." Alara's eyes widened. "Others? What do you mean?" Before Kale could answer, the door to the chamber burst open, and a cold wind swept in, extinguishing several candles. The shadows in the room deepened, and a figure appeared in the doorway, a dark silhouette with glowing eyes. It moved with speed and grace, and Alara could feel its hunger, its intent, though she did not yet understand what it wanted. Kale stepped in front of her, his body tense and protective. "Stay behind me," he said firmly. "Do not fear, yet be ready. This is only the beginning." The figure advanced, and the mirrors along the walls began to shatter, pieces falling to the floor with a deafening crash. The chamber seemed alive with energy, reacting to the confrontation. Alara clutched Kale's arm, her heart racing, but she felt a strange sense of trust. She knew he would protect her no matter the danger. The shadow stopped a few feet from them, and in that moment Alara saw its face, or rather, what should have been a face. It was twisted, emotionless, and hungry. The air grew colder still, and whispers filled the chamber, voices speaking in a language she could not understand. Kale's eyes blazed with golden fire. "You will not harm her," he said, his voice low and commanding. "Not while I draw breath." The shadow hissed, circling them, its form shifting and growing darker. Alara felt a surge of fear, but also a strange exhilaration. She realized that she had stepped into a world she had never imagined, a world of power, danger, and destiny. And she also realized something else. She was not afraid of Kale. She was afraid of losing him, of failing him, and of failing herself. The shadow lunged forward, and Kale moved with speed she had never imagined, his figure a blur as he intercepted it. The clash sent a shockwave through the chamber, rattling the mirrors and making the pedestal tremble. Alara stumbled, catching herself against the wall, her pulse racing. Kale's voice cut through the chaos. "Alara, do not turn away. Trust me, and you will survive this." Tears streamed down her face, but she nodded. She could not explain why, but she trusted him completely, even as the danger surrounded them. The shadow hesitated, sensing Kale's power, and then, with a shriek that echoed through the manor, it vanished into the darkness, leaving the chamber shaken but intact. Kale lowered his guard, breathing heavily, but his eyes never left Alara. "This is only the beginning," he said, his voice soft but filled with warning. "The world outside this manor is aware of your presence, and not all will be kind. You must be prepared, and you must be ready to embrace what you are meant to be." Alara's legs shook, but she took a deep breath and stood tall. She looked into Kale's eyes, and for the first time she felt a strange sense of purpose. She had come to the manor out of curiosity, but she would not leave without understanding. She would face the darkness, the history, and the power that had waited for her for centuries. Kale reached out, taking her hand gently. "Come," he said. "There is more you must see, more you must learn. The bond has begun, whether you realize it or not. And soon, you will understand what it truly means to inherit not just a house, but a destiny." Alara nodded, her heart pounding with fear and excitement. The manor felt alive around them, whispering, breathing, and watching, and she realized that nothing would ever be the same. She had entered a world of shadows, of longing, and of power beyond her imagining. She had met the vampire king who had waited 3 centuries, and she knew, deep down, that the story of her life, and the life of the manor, was only beginning. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, carrying with it the promise of danger, magic, and a destiny that would bind her and Kale together in ways she could not yet imagine. And in the shadows, unseen by human eyes, other forces stirred, watching, waiting, and waiting for the moment to strike. Alara squeezed Kale's hand, her resolve firm. Whatever awaited them, she would face it. Together, the manor had awakened. And so had destiny. Alara woke before dawn, the manor wrapped in a thick, silvery mist. The events of the previous night lingered in her mind. The shadow, Kale's golden eyes, the weight of centuries pressing on her. She rose carefully, the floor cold beneath her feet, and moved to the window. Outside, the gardens lay silent and still, the fog curling around the statues and hedges like living fingers. The manor felt alive, watching her, waiting for what she would do next. Kale stood silently behind her. He had not spoken, but his presence was reassuring. Tall, pale, and powerful, he seemed like a part of the manor itself, its guardian, its secret, its soul. "You did well yesterday," he said quietly, his voice like velvet, soft yet commanding. "The shadow will not return tonight, but there are others and they will come. You must be ready." Alara turned, her eyes wide. "Others? What do you mean?" Kale studied her for a moment, his golden gaze intense. "There are those who monitor this place, who sense when the bloodline awakens. Not all of them are kind. Some wish to take what is yours, what is mine, or what belongs to the manor. You must learn to trust yourself and to trust me." Alara nodded, a mixture of fear and resolve filling her chest. She had already faced a shadow that could have killed her, yet she had survived. With Kale's guidance, she felt a strange strength, as if the manor itself was lending her courage. He stepped closer and offered his hand. "Come, there is much to see, much to learn. If you are to remain here, you must understand the house, its history, and your place within it." Alara took his hand, feeling the warmth and power in his touch. Together, they walked through the halls, moving toward a section of the manor she had not yet explored. The air grew colder as they approached a spiral staircase leading down to the basement. The walls here were older, the stone rough and worn by centuries. Faint carvings depicted battles, rituals, and figures she could not identify, their faces twisted in expressions of pain and longing. "This is the heart of the manor," Kale explained as they descended. "Here lies the history that is often forgotten. The past of your family, the origin of the curse, and the secrets that bind me to this place. You must see it to understand." At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a vast chamber filled with artifacts. Ancient weapons lined the walls, old paintings hung crookedly, and cabinets of glass displayed objects she did not recognize. Each piece seemed to hum with energy, as if the manor remembered its owners and the events that had taken place here. Kale moved to a large glass case, lifting the lid carefully. Inside rested a small, ornate dagger, its blade black and etched with symbols similar to those in the book she had read. "This dagger was used in the rituals that bound me here," Kale said, his voice tinged with sorrow. "It was meant to hold me, to prevent me from seeking justice for the wrongs done to me. And yet, it also protects the manor from those who would take it by force." Alara traced the symbols with her finger, a strange shiver running through her. "It's beautiful and terrible," she said softly. "Why did they do this? Why hurt you?" Kale's eyes darkened, a shadow crossing his features. "Power, greed, fear. Your ancestors wanted to control me, to harness what they did not understand. But in doing so, they bound me and left me to suffer for centuries. And now, it is up to you to undo it." Alara felt a weight settle on her shoulders. She had come seeking curiosity, inheritance, and perhaps a sense of adventure. She had not expected the burden of centuries, the need to right ancient wrongs, and yet she felt a strange determination rising within her. I will try," she said quietly. "I don't know how, but I will." Kale's gaze softened and he reached out to touch her hand. "That is all I ask. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it. You have that, Alara, more than you realize." They spent the morning exploring the chamber, Kale showing her objects, books, and relics that held the history of the manor and the vampire king. Alara listened, absorbed in the stories of betrayal, loss, and sacrifice. She began to understand the depth of Kale's suffering, the loneliness of centuries, the longing for freedom, and the restraint he had exercised despite the hunger that gnawed at him day and night. As they moved deeper into the chamber, Cale paused before a large mirror framed in dark, polished wood. The glass was not ordinary. It shimmered with an inner light, reflecting not just their images but fragments of the past. "This mirror shows the echoes of time," Cale explained. "You can see events that occurred here long ago, shadows of moments that shaped the present. It is not always kind, but it teaches truth." Alara stepped closer, her breath catching as she saw flickers of the past, the manor alive with its former inhabitants, the rituals that had bound Cale, the moments of betrayal, and the faces of her ancestors. She felt a surge of sorrow and guilt, though she had not lived these times. Yet somehow she understood the weight of history and the responsibility that had been placed upon her. Cale's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "Do not despair," he said. "The past cannot be changed, but it can be understood, and in understanding it can be healed. That is why you are here." Alara nodded, tears prickling her eyes. She had come to the manor seeking answers, but she had found so much more: a connection to the past, a sense of purpose, and a growing bond with Cale that she could not explain. They moved on, reaching a narrow corridor that led to a small, hidden garden inside the manor. The garden was overgrown, yet it held a strange beauty. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, illuminating flowers that glowed faintly in the darkness. The air was scented with jasmine and roses, and Alara felt a sense of peace she had not known since childhood. "This garden survived the centuries," Cale said quietly. "It is a reminder that life persists, even in darkness. It is a symbol of what can endure and what can be restored." Alara knelt to touch the petals of a flower, amazed at its resilience. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Like hope," Cale watched her, his expression unreadable. "Hope is dangerous," he said softly, "but it is also necessary. Without it, the soul cannot endure, and you, Alara, have brought hope back to this place." As they walked back toward the manor, the wind outside shifted, carrying a sense of warning. Shadows moved along the walls, and the whispers of the manor grew louder. Cale stiffened, his senses alert. "They are coming," he said, his voice low and tense. "Not the shadow you faced last night, but others, forces that will challenge us, that seek to claim the manor and the bloodline." Alara's heart pounded. "What can we do?" Cale turned to her, his golden eyes burning with intensity. "We prepare, we learn, and we trust in each other. You have strength, Alara, more than you know, and together we are stronger than anything they can send." The rest of the day passed in a tense mixture of study and preparation. Cale taught Alara about the manor's hidden passages, the wards that protected it, and the spells that could be used to defend it. Alara listened intently, absorbing every detail, realizing that her curiosity had transformed into purpose. As night fell again, the manor seemed to grow darker, the shadows deeper, as if sensing the rising tension. Alara could feel it too, the eyes of unseen beings, the pull of forces she could not yet name. And yet she no longer felt alone. Cale's presence was a shield, a guide, and a companion. They stood together in the main hall, looking out through the tall windows at the mist-covered grounds. The wind howled, carrying a sense of warning, and the portraits along the walls seemed to watch, their eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. "Alara," Cale said, his voice low and commanding, "tonight will be a test. You must trust me completely. Danger will come to this house, and you must be ready to face it, not with fear but with courage." Alara nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. "I trust you," she said softly. "I will face it, whatever comes." Cale's expression softened, and he placed a hand gently on her cheek. "Good. That trust is the beginning, and the bond, it grows stronger with each choice you make, with each act of courage and understanding." The manor grew silent for a moment, the only sound the faint rustle of wind through broken windows. Then, in the distance, a shadow moved, darker than the night itself. It came with purpose, its presence cold and hungry. Ilara's pulse quickened. She felt the weight of centuries, the pull of destiny, and the inevitability of what was to come. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between her and the approaching darkness. His eyes flared with golden fire, and his body radiated power, centuries of strength and restraint compressed into a single living force. "You will not harm her," he said, his voice resonating through the hall. "Not while I stand." The shadow hesitated, then advanced, a figure moving faster than the eye could follow. Ilara clutched Kale's arm, her heart pounding, but she felt a strange sense of courage. She would not run. She would face this with him, together. And as the shadow drew near, the manor itself seemed to awaken, the walls humming with ancient energy, the air thick with magic and history. The battle was coming, and with it, the truth of the manor, the curse, and the bond that tied Ilara and Kale together would be tested like never before. Ilara took a deep breath, her resolve firm. She had entered a world of shadows, magic, and destiny. She had met the vampire king who had waited 3 centuries, and now she would stand by him as they faced the dangers that sought to claim what was theirs. The night was far from over, and the story of the manor and of Ilara and Kale was only beginning. The manor was silent now, but the air hummed with tension. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, rattling the ancient windows. Shadows stretched along the walls, longer and darker than before. Ilara stood beside Kale, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes were steady. She had spent weeks learning the secrets of the manor, discovering the past of her ancestors, and understanding the depth of Kale's suffering. She had grown stronger, braver, and more certain of her place here, by his side, facing whatever came. Kale's golden eyes scanned the halls, alert and commanding. His presence was a shield, but even he could feel the pull of forces approaching. The shadows had been gathering for nights, drawn to her bloodline, to the bond between them, and to the manor itself. Tonight they would come. "They are near," Kale said quietly, his voice low but steady. "Whatever comes, we face it together. Remember what I taught you. Trust yourself. Trust me." Ilara nodded, her chest tight with anticipation. She had learned much, but nothing could have fully prepared her for this. Her heart raced, yet she felt a calm determination beneath the fear. This was the moment she had been preparing for. The first movement came as a ripple in the shadows, a figure slipping through the hallway like mist. Then another, and another. The shadows coalesced into forms dark and menacing, their eyes glinting with hunger. They were spirits, guardians of the curse, and perhaps more. They sought to test her, to claim what was hers, to disrupt the balance Kale and she had fought to restore. Kale stepped forward, placing himself in front of her. His body radiated power, and the golden light in his eyes flared brighter. "Stay behind me," he said. "Do not fear, but be ready." Ilara's hands clenched at her sides, but she did not move away. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. And she would not abandon Kale, not now, not ever. The shadows lunged, but Kale met them with a force that was both terrifying and beautiful. His movements were precise, strong, and controlled. He did not strike to destroy alone, but to protect. The shadows hissed and recoiled at his power, but they did not retreat. They were relentless, born from centuries of anger and magic tied to the manor. Ilara watched, awe and fear mixing in her chest. And then she realized something. Her own presence, her own courage, made the shadows hesitate. They were drawn to her, but her resolve gave them pause. The bond Kale had spoken of, the bond of trust, understanding, and courage, was already changing the balance. "Step forward," Kale said suddenly, his hand reaching for hers. "You must take your place in this, not behind me, but beside me. The bond is stronger when we face this together." Her pulse quickened. She hesitated for only a moment, then stepped forward. She felt a strange warmth in Kale's hand, a connection that was more than touch, more than blood. It was trust, courage, and recognition of the shared destiny that had brought them here. Together, they faced the shadows. Alara felt energy coursing through her, as if the manor itself responded to her resolve. The walls vibrated with power, and the portraits of her ancestors seemed to glow faintly, as if acknowledging her presence, her courage, and her choice to face what others had failed to. The shadows attacked again, but this time, Alara acted. She focused on the knowledge Kale had shared, the wards, the protection spells, the energy of the manor itself. She raised her hands, and a soft golden light emerged from her palms, a reflection of Kale's power amplified by her courage. The shadows hissed and recoiled, some dissipating into nothingness, others retreating to the corners of the hall. Kale's eyes glowed brighter and he smiled faintly at her. "Well done," he said, his voice proud. "You are stronger than you know." But their victory was short-lived. A larger shadow emerged from the depths of the manor, taller and darker than the others. It moved with purpose, its form shifting, its eyes gleaming with hunger and malice. This was the final test, the culmination of centuries of curses, anger, and power bound to the manor and her bloodline. Kale stepped in front of Alara instinctively, his body tensing for the attack. "Stay close," he said. "This one is powerful, but together we can face it." Alara's heart pounded, but she did not back away. She felt the strength in Kale and herself and in the bond they shared. The fear that had once consumed her was replaced with determination. She would not fail, not him, not the manor, not herself. The shadow lunged. Kale met it with a force that shook the chamber, his golden light clashing with the darkness. The battle was fierce, energy and magic colliding, the manor itself trembling with the force. Alara's own light flared, joining Kale's, and together they pushed back the darkness. But the shadow was relentless. It struck at Kale, and for the first time she saw him falter slightly. His strength alone was not enough, he needed her. "Alara," Kale called, his voice strained. "Now focus your energy, use the bond." She closed her eyes, feeling the bond between them, centuries of waiting, longing, and trust flowing through her. She let her heart guide her, her courage strengthen her, and her love for Kale fuel her power. Golden light burst from her, enveloping them both, and the shadow shrieked in pain, recoiling from the brilliance. Kale seized the moment, striking with precision, and the shadow dissipated into nothingness, leaving the chamber silent but trembling. The air was thick with energy, and the portraits along the walls glowed faintly, as if the manor itself were acknowledging their victory. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. Kale knelt beside her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly, his golden eyes warm and proud. "Together we faced the darkness and we prevailed." She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered. Kale shook his head, a faint smile touching his lips. "No. You did it because you are strong, brave, and willing. The bond between us is more than magic. It is trust, understanding, and courage. That is what defeats the darkness." Alara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of centuries lift slightly from her shoulders. The manor, once heavy with shadows, now seemed lighter, its air filled with a quiet peace. She realized that the curse that had bound Kale for centuries was broken, not by strength alone, but by the bond they shared, by her courage, and by their willingness to face the past together. Kale helped her to her feet, and they walked together through the manor. The halls were still ancient and vast, but there was a sense of calm, a soft glow that filled the rooms. The shadows had not vanished entirely, but they no longer threatened. They seemed to retreat, watching but respecting the bond that now existed between Alara and Kale. They reached the main chamber, where the book of the manor's history rested. Alara opened it again, reading the final pages. The words spoke of redemption, of bonds stronger than curses, and of love that could transcend centuries. She felt a deep sense of peace. She had inherited more than a manor. She had inherited purpose, courage, and the chance to heal what had been broken for generations. Kale stood beside her, his hand brushing hers gently. "The past is behind us now," he said. "The manor is ours, and the bond we share will guide its future. The darkness may return one day, but together we are ready." Alara looked at him, her heart full. "I understand now. This place, you, everything. It's not just about inheritance or power. It's about connection, courage, and love." Kale's eyes softened, the intensity of centuries replaced with warmth and tenderness. "Yes," he said, "and that is why I waited and why you were called. Not just for the blood, not just for the curse, but for this. For understanding, for redemption, for love." Outside, the wind had calmed. The mist over the mountains glowed in the soft moonlight, and the manor seemed alive in a different way, vibrant, peaceful, and full of potential. Alara realized that the house had accepted her, that it had recognized her courage, and that it would protect her as she had protected it. Kale reached for her hand, holding it gently. "Come," he said. "There is still much to discover, much to learn, and much to build. But for now, rest. The manor is ours, and the bond we share will guide us through whatever comes next." Alara nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest she had never known before. The fear, the uncertainty, and the shadows of the past had not disappeared entirely, but they no longer held power over her. She had faced them, embraced her courage, and chosen to stand beside Kale, the vampire king who had waited 3 centuries. They walked together through the halls, the candlelight casting long shadows that now seemed gentle rather than threatening. The portraits of her ancestors no longer seemed to judge her. They watched with quiet acknowledgement, as if the past had been forgiven and the future entrusted to her hands. In the garden, the moonlight glinted off the petals of flowers that had survived centuries of neglect. Alara bent to touch them, feeling their resilience, their beauty, and the quiet strength that mirrored her own. Kale stood behind her, his presence steady and comforting. "You brought life back to this place," he said softly, "and in doing so, you brought it back to me as well." Alara turned, meeting his golden eyes. "And you taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's facing it." Kale smiled faintly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "Then we are well matched," he said quietly. "Together, we will face whatever comes. The manor, the world, the future, all of it." Alara felt a deep sense of peace. She had inherited a haunted manor, faced shadows, and discovered the depth of history and magic bound to her bloodline. She had met Kale, the vampire king, and through courage, trust, and understanding, they had broken the curse that had bound him for centuries. As they stood together under the soft moonlight, the manor behind them and the mountains beyond, she realized that life would never be the same. The darkness might return, challenges might come, but for the first time she was ready, not afraid, not alone, but standing beside the one who had waited for her and whom she had chosen to trust. Kale's hand found hers and they walked through the garden, the soft petals brushing against their fingers, the wind carrying a sense of peace and possibility. The manor had awakened, and so had destiny. Together, they would face whatever lay ahead. And in that quiet, silver-lit night, the first hints of a new dawn touched the mountains, promising hope, renewal, and the beginning of a story that would last beyond centuries.